most stunning ride, going past it as though he's standing still. Tiger has left absolutely everything out on the run, and the Danes are going absolutely wild here.
Good morning, a very warm welcome to Imola here in Emilia, Romagna for day 4 of competition and the men's elite road race at the UCI Road World Championships. Well, good morning. A warm welcome here as we get ready for the men's elite road race. 177 riders taking to the race start. A nice day ahead. A little bit of a chill in the air this morning. The weather conditions have changed quite substantially. 17 degrees centigrade. It's overcast. The wind is nice and calm, though, only 3 kilometres an hour compared to the really strong winds that we've seen over the last couple of days. So that's going to have a little bit of a bearing on today's race, and there is a promise of some rain this afternoon. Let's hope that that doesn't come to too much. Here's the previous champions over the last few years. Mads Pedersen taking that win in Yorkshire last year, Alejandro Valverde the year before in Innsbruck, and of course the domination of Peter Sagan for 3 years running, with Mikhail Kwiatkowski the winner in Ponferrada in Spain. Let's take a look then at the course. Last year it was Mads Pedersen who took the victory in Yorkshire. I'd forgotten just how brutal that day was. 258.2 kilometres of racing today for the men's elite. 9 laps of this 28.8 kilometre course, taking in the 2 major climbs at Mazzolano and also coming out of Isola towards the Cima Gallistanera. That's where the riders are going to really feel the steepness of the gradient as they make their way back down to the famous Ferrari Autodrome here at the race finish. 9 laps. As always, the World Championships tends to be a little bit of a slow burn, and we'll see who takes the victory in a few hours' time. We expect that the race will finish around 4:20 local time to 5:05 in the afternoon, depending on how fast the riders decide to get this World Championship over and done with. That was the list of the commissaires that we're going to have in the various cars and around the course, as we take a look then at the riders who will be taking part in this year's race. A big Danish team getting ready for today's race. Mads Pedersen, though, will not take to the start. It's not really a course for him. But all the big names are here otherwise. The riders who think that they can take this world title 177 riders taken to the race start. We'll let you digest the various names on the list. The riders are about to go to the start line. The Call of Nations is about to happen, then they'll have the rollout and then the race getting underway. Alongside me for today's race, I'm Anthony Macross, and alongside me is Lucy Martin, who joined us yesterday for the women's race. Lucy, welcome to the men's elite road race. We saw the women yesterday. We've got the men's race today. And as always, this is going to be a huge race over quite a few hours.
Yeah, it's certainly a long race today, as always, for the World Championships. And it's going to be such an interesting race with 9 laps, 18 climbs. We saw yesterday how brutal the climbs were, how steep they are. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Is it going to be a race just for the climbers, the pure climbers, or are we going to see more of the punchy riders able to get across all those climbs and contest the finish? I'm really not sure. And of course, is there going to be rain?
We'll see if the rain does fall this afternoon. It's forecast around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yesterday we enjoyed a great women's race with Anna van der Breggen taking the victory, but you spend most of your time around about the men's circuit with Mitchelton Scott. So you're looking forward to seeing how the men will perform during today's race.
Yeah, and I think this year more than ever, it's going to be a bit different, isn't it? After the Tour de France, people are going to be a bit tired. Have they recovered enough? People preparing for the Giro d'Italia, are they in really top form? Are they ready to go? There's a few people, key names, not here racing because they're preparing for the Giro. But yeah, this whole year is just a bit crazy, and 2020 is very unpredictable. And I think today maybe it'll be an predictable winner.
You've just been at Tirreno Adriatico with Simon Yates, who won there. What did that tell you about the way that the riders have started the restart of the season? Did you see differences in form that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, definitely. There's certainly quite a difference. Some people have come out of the lockdown period, the period of no racing, in absolutely top form, ready to hit the goals, which basically come one after the other, all the races. Whereas I did notice some others, slow starters, they need to get a few more races in the legs, get into the rhythm of racing again. And obviously it's a personal thing. It's completely different for each rider and how they adapt to racing or not racing. And yeah, I think more or less by now we're in October or end of September, and I think most of the men's peloton, they've had a decent amount of racing, so they kind of know where they're at. And bit different to the first races we saw back. Everybody's been able to pin on a number and have a go and kind of get that top end back.
The riders then lining up, as we see the Italians today are going to be really loving being here for this race. Let's see whether they can manage to take a victory. They've already had a gold with Filippo Ganna. They saw the bronze medal yesterday with, of course, Elisa Longoborghini. This is the Imola Rocca Sforzesca. This is the fortress dating back to the 13th century. Very imposing building there in the landscape itself. Imola hosting these World Championships, known, of course, around the world for its racetrack, which we're looking down on here. The longest running racetrack in the region, dates back to 1952. Lots of races have been held here at the Enzo and Dino Ferrari International Racetrack. But of course the San Marino Grand Prix was held here from 1981 to 2006. It's a great host for these World Championships. I thought some of the pictures that we saw yesterday, looking down on the Autodrome as the riders raced around there, was really a little bit like super bikes, a little bit like MotoGP when you're looking down as they went through the alcove and everything.
Yeah, it's a really cool course, isn't it? And it's obviously one that everyone will remember. It's a bit unique, starting and finishing here on this Formula One track. So I think the riders will remember it, probably just because of how hard it is with all these climbs. But yeah, I really like this kind of start-finish area.
The riders rolling out for the race start behind the car, so they're going to just get themselves formed up behind the car, and then they will be allowed to go. always difficult at the start of the men's elite road race because it's such a long way, 258 kilometres today over these tough climbs. The riders tend to let a breakaway go, and then the race kind of boils to a surface, really. It reminds me a lot of Milano-San Remo when we look at this race, because things just start to increase in tempo all the way through the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's a long way to go, and riders know it's a long day in the saddle, and also they know they need to conserve the energy and not do anything too dramatic at the start. Obviously, they'll be fighting to make the breakaway, those riders that prefer to have a teammate or themselves go into the breakaway. So obviously you have to make an effort to make that move, but then afterwards generally just settles down, and we see that a lot in men's racing. The breakaways going, getting out to really many minutes ahead, but knowing that the power behind riders have teammates that can bring it back basically when they want. I think today might be a bit harder though with the narrow, twisty roads. It's not a simple race where the breakaway goes and you roll along. You've got to be focusing the whole time. You've got to stay near the front. You've got to keep yourself out of trouble, because it's a course that we saw yesterday a couple of crashes on the descents. You just touch wheels in the wrong moments and it can really affect what happens later. If it's coming towards the base of these really hard climbs, then it's really important to make sure you're always in a good position. And I think mentally today will be hard for a lot of people, just to keep that focus every single lap after lap, climb after climb, descents, corners. But all these riders, they're very, very experienced. They can handle that. They do it day after day. So I think it'll be good, but it'll certainly be a physically and mentally draining day.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We know that the length of this peloton with 177 riders is going to be pretty demanding for the riders at the back when they're going over the top of climbs, and riders are already way down the descents. It's a long tail of a peloton. And if someone lets the gap go at the wrong moment, then you're in a position where you just never get back. We saw that also yesterday with riders leaving gaps and then riders unable to cross to what they thought was a relatively easy split to get back into. There's a couple of riders sitting in their cars and just trying to make their way back into this group before this race does get underway. Looks like everyone is pretty relaxed here at the front. They're not looking too concerned about the weather conditions. Last year we had Yorkshire, which was an absolute deluge for the entire day. The weather forecast, Lucy, keeps changing today. We've seen moments of the possibility of a deluge of rain all day. Now it's looking a little bit more like we're going to get heavy rain sometime towards the end of the race, but we may avoid the worst of it.
Yeah, and you can see that just by what everybody's wearing. It's a lot colder than yesterday. Obviously, the race start is a few hours earlier than the women's race as well. But it's not really heating up today. It's not like yesterday. So you can see everybody with their vests, arm warmers. They're wrapped up. It's not going to be a hot day out. And also the riders know if there's rain, they need to be prepared for it. And they need to make sure they're warm at the start. They've got the rain vests and... yeah, they've got enough layers on because it could be a chilly afternoon with rain, and if you're cold, it makes everything so much harder. It's uncomfortable. You get more hungry, more tired. It's just not a nice feeling. So yeah, lots of riders with plenty of layers on in that peloton today.
Yeah, the weather forecast is saying 17 degrees centigrade at a maximum, but the rain may come around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is around about an hour and a half before the race finish. But that's getting pushed all the time. We've seen it starting at 2 o'clock. Now it's saying 3 o'clock. The worst of the weather will be around 8 p.m. this evening. So we're avoiding what was going to be happening, which was really bad rainstorms around about 1 o'clock this afternoon. So it looks like we might just avoid all of it. We might see the winner finishing in pouring rain this afternoon. Let's wait and hope that we get the best of the weather here in Imola, because yesterday, I don't know about you, but the pictures that we had yesterday were absolutely stunning. Last night, everyone was tweeting about the the pictures, the helicopter shots of Anna van der Breggen as she went across that ridge on her way to victory, which was looking like a feature film.
Yeah, that was really, really cool shots there from the helicopter, and I'm sure shots that she'll probably even photograph, she'll want to print off herself and keep, because it was amazing. On her way to the world title along the ridge. A little bit cloudier today, so I don't know if we'll have the same kind of photos, videos from the helicopter vision, but also it's not really as windy today, is it? It's quite a different day, but I'm sure this peloton, they're just relieved it's not like Yorkshire last year, because that was brutal.
It was brutal, yeah. Last year was absolutely incredible. The pictures of yesterday were stunning. We had breakfast this morning. The director of the pictures came in to have breakfast, and we congratulated him and the helicopter crew on the shots that we saw yesterday. Those of you who don't know, those shots weren't from a drone. They were from helicopter flying literally below the ridge surface. Because there was a drop away and the helicopter was able to just run alongside and track Anna van der Breggen. But it takes a huge amount of skill from the helicopter pilot and the cameraman who was in the back to actually get that tracking shot. And the director of this race is Jean-Marie Sog, who was the director of the Tour de France for 30 years. And he said to us this morning that when he drove around the circuit, he took a look at that ridge and thought, that could create a cinematic shot of a rider if he could get it right. And that's what they managed to do yesterday.
Yeah, they certainly got it right, didn't they? And it's great when you can also see a different angle, a different view. You can see the whole region here and how beautiful it is, and not just shots of the peloton. And it really kind of was dramatic, wasn't it, when she was obviously away solo, riding along the ridge. It was like a movie, yeah. It was
like being in a big cinema watching an incredibly well-shot thing, but to do that live on television with a race going on is extremely hard. The riders then rolling around the circuit for the procession, the neutralized start, which as always just gets everybody formed up. Yesterday we saw a crash at the end of the women's race, so hopefully we won't see that. The riders will have already gone past the Ayrton Senna Memorial, which is on the bend here at Imola, in which he crashed his car and sadly passed away. We remember Ayrton Senna today. Lucy and I went and took some photos of the tribute to him here on the tribune. And a little bit further away, there's the Ayrton Senna Memorial and the Brazilian flags, which are all still posted there at the side, just around about 800 metres away from the finish line here on the Imola circuit.
Yeah, it's definitely got a lot of history, hasn't it, this circuit? And Imola as well. This is my first time here, and I must say, really, really nice region. I really like it, and I think having the World Championships here at such short notice, it's been so successful in the events we've seen so far, and finding a course which was as hard or similar in terrain as the planned World Championships in Switzerland. I think that the UCI did a great job to actually get this and basically produced a similar winner. The course that the people were training for, focusing for in Switzerland, I think they've done a good job to find this here. And so far so good. Everything's been really great, and we've seen some aggressive racing, haven't we?
We have, and I think if they'd put on a World Championships, as we see Marc Soler there in the colours of Spain, and there's Primoz Roglic. Can he win today after his disappointment of last weekend, losing the Tour de France on the penultimate day? Can he turn his focus into getting a rainbow jersey? The riders then starting to speed up behind the car. Looks like we're going to see some pretty aggressive racing. Riders want to start some attacks quite early. The commissaire asking for them to just drop back a little bit. Getting quite quick. This tailwind along this section, which is not as strong as yesterday, certainly does mean that the riders want to get a little bit of speed going. It's a bit narrow as we make our way out of here now, and you do need to be near the front.
Yeah, this whole course is like this. You go onto the track, really, really wide roads around this whole aerodrome, and then it narrows. You've got that funneling out to go on the course, and then, of course, on the course, the very, very narrow twisty roads, and we saw yesterday in the women's race how strung out the peloton was. It must have been 800 metres from the front of the bunch to the back of the bunch, and that's fine. When it all bunches up again, even if you're towards the back, you can generally get back to the front on the lap 1, lap 2, lap 3, but as you get tired, you don't want to be hanging around the back because it's just an extra effort, an extra pinch of the legs to get to the front.
We're underway already then in the men's elite road race. Immediate attacks at the front as we see riders trying to sneak into the early breakaway. Azerbaijan represented here as we see more attacks. Which nations are going to get into this initial breakaway? That's the question. Are we going to see any of the big nations decide to put riders up in this group of riders? Big attacks now. Romania represented, Azerbaijan, also South Africa also in the mix.
It almost looked like that group that jumped away was just going to stay straight away, but I saw, another rider then from the peloton decided to go, and that creates the movement where it all comes back together again. So I think we'll see this yo-yoing for a little bit until the elastic snaps, until the peloton's happy to let the combination of riders go away, nobody too dangerous. And then we'll see, generally we should see a move just clip away and quickly move up the road.
The rider who started that attack at the front for Romania was Edward Grosu. He was up towards the front trying to get involved in the action. And when you're in a small team, you've only got one rider, you've got to really think about the moves that you get into, haven't you? You've just got to think, okay, got to freelance a little bit, get myself into this breakaway and see if it sticks for a long time today.
Yeah, exactly. If you're in a team and you've got numbers, you can try with one rider to go in the break. If it doesn't work, then your teammate goes. But if it's simply you, maybe one or two other teammates, you have to really decide where to spend your energy, and especially early on. We've got 256 kilometres to go, so you can't be jumping in every single move, every single combination of breakaway at the start, and that's why it's so hard sometimes to get into the break. Which one do you go in? You could follow 5 different moves and they don't go, and then the 6th one does. So it's a bit of a gamble. You need a bit of luck, but there's definitely breakaway specialists and the riders that somehow just know which one's going to stick, and they often jump into the moves. You see even at the Tour de France, the same riders able to get into the same breakaways. So it'll be a bit different here, the World Championships, because I think, there's a lot of smaller nations without numbers that really want to make a race today and not just sit in the peloton. They want to be out there. They want to be representing their country well in a move and giving themselves the best opportunity.
The riders involved in the mix at the front, we just saw an attack from the Greek rider, Polykronos Tozakis. He was the rider who was trying to break away. Also the Azerbaijan rider, Elkin Asadov, was involved in that action. Now we see a little bit of action at the front from Luxembourg, and Ben Gastauer trying to get himself into the mix and get involved in the action, get himself up the road nice and early. Long peloton, we're heading towards the first climb of the day, and that first climb is the rise that we saw yesterday. That's the least difficult climb, the first rise that the riders will go into.
Yeah, and I mean, we're only a couple of kilometres in, aren't we? But it's come so quickly, this first climb. Every lap, as soon as they leave the autodrome and they go out onto the course, the climb's there. But yeah, a little bit of time before we really see the harder climb that comes a bit later. It's a lot steeper. I don't know if it's a lot steeper really, but it seems a lot harder, doesn't it? We saw people suffering really a lot more on that second climb yesterday.
We did yesterday. That climb really hurt the legs of many, many riders. This is Grustev now going off the front. Dmitry Grustev rides for Kazakhstan, is the solo attacker, but the riders seem to not want to let this one go. None of the big nations are blocking this off yet, and they seem to be happy with just the accelerations happening. Maybe thinking that when we get onto this first climb, it's automatically going to cause a breakaway to form and things to form their natural course.
Yeah, it's always so interesting, isn't it, the start of a men's race? Who is going to go into the breakaway and who's deciding, no, we don't want that rider to go up the road? Which teams think you know, we need to keep a lookout for such a person going in the breakaway, or when's the moment where they decide, yep, that's fine, we'll let it go?
Right on the back of the peloton is Tom Pidcock, the young British rider. Tim Vellen's already taken off his gilet, has decided that he's going to get rid of that, so it must be a little bit warmer as we see Fominik now at the front from Kazakhstan open up a little bit of an attack. Germany putting a rider in here, which is surprising, Germany being a big nation. Normally we see attacks with the smaller nations, and then we see the counter-attacks coming from behind with the bigger squads looking to get involved. There is Tom Pidcock, just won the Baby Giro, so he's quite home in Italy. Pidcock, an under-23 rider, 21 years of age. He's a rider who's just signed for Ineos Grenadiers.
Yeah,
but normally the under-23 rider's not allowed to ride this road race.
No, exactly, but this year it's so different in so many ways, and of course we're at the World Championships. They were changed last minute, and therefore there's no junior racing and no under-23 racing. So to compensate for that, there's been they've changed the rules basically, where riders are now allowed to start in this elite men's race. So looking through the start list, there's quite a few younger riders which we normally wouldn't see making the selection of the elite teams. And it's interesting also to see a rider like Pidcock actually selected. He's such a talented rider, but normally in the larger nations, it's hard to even select the older, more experienced guys anyway, because obviously you've only got a certain number of riders that you're allowed to select, and those spots get taken up easily. So it's more the smaller nations with less riders to choose from that have put their under-23 riders in for the experience. But yeah, Pidcock's made it for the GB team.
And he sounds like he's going to be the leader of the Great Britain team today, so they're all going to ride for him.
Yeah.
Which is a huge amount of faith in such a young rider to think, OK, let's see how far he can go. They clearly think that the form he's got from the Baby Giro is going to stand him in good stead to do well today, as we now start to see this first breakaway group forming here at the front. And it looks like we've got a group of 7 riders going clear now. And this looks like a more established breakaway as they head off the front here of this group of riders. And the peloton has pretty much let them go.
Yeah, and interestingly, it wasn't on the climb, was it? It was almost on the descent. They just let them sneak off. And, yeah, now peloton cruising along. They're quite happy, aren't they, with that move, that combination. And it didn't really take too long today for those riders to get away.
No, it didn't. The riders then on the climb, and we've got this group of riders that have formed up. Looks like we've got around about 7 riders then who have made their way into this front group. And the riders who are in there are Jonas Koch of Germany, Torsten Train of Norway, Marco Friedrich of Austria, Daniel Fominik of Kazakhstan, Yuki Arashiro of Japan, Edward Grosu of Romania, and Ulises Castillo Soto of Mexico. Those are the 7 riders who are now in the group, and they've made their way off the front.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you said, usually it might be the smaller nations who try and go in the breakaway, as we can see Mexico, Japan, they've not got as many numbers in this race, but Germany, they've jumped into the breakaway.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they've put a rider up here so early, but they've obviously decided that they've got a plan today, and they're going to ensure that the plan is played out, and what that plan involves putting a rider up the road, same as Norway. And Kazakhstan with Fominik are probably thinking later on about Alexei Lutsenko as a possible winner of this race. Lutsenko, a stage winner in the Tour de France this season.
Yeah, and that completely takes the pressure off him and his country, doesn't it? They can just sit back. They've got a teammate up there in the breakaway. I mean, they've got numbers in this race. They're not the smallest nation, but they don't have as many riders as the other teams. And with that, why not put somebody in the break? He can sit back. He doesn't need to chase. He doesn't need to use up his teammates. And it's just a good position to be in.
Making their way up the first part of the climb then, 1:32 they've already taken. That was pretty substantial opening of a gap then between the front group of riders and the peloton. Now everything's just going to calm down a little bit. But it's already interesting that some of the favourites are already at the front, staying out of trouble, not wasting energy.
Yeah, and I think most of these riders, everybody will have gone round the course and checked it out, and they'll just know it's a hard course because it's so narrow. So why risk being towards the back and the peloton going into one big long line, having to chase those little small efforts to get back on, get around the corner, be in a position. It's just easier on this kind of course to just stay closer to the front. You're a bit more out of trouble. You're able to see what's happening, make sure nobody else is sneaking up the road, and just relax, kind of switch off a bit more mentally, because you know you're at the front of the race. You're not in trouble. You're not going to get dropped. They're going at a steady pace, so it's not like riders are going to get dropped, but they're just more in control, aren't they? Not necessarily on the front row, not with the head in the wind, but in those front positions, teammates around, and just testing the legs, seeing how they feel the first couple of laps now up these climbs.
The Belgian team staying very near the front. Tim Vellens is there. Also, Wout van Aert is towards the front. So they're not really leaving anything to chance today. They are riding in the key positions, making sure that there is no issues for their riders. We'll see whether that pays good dividends later on today. The Great Britain team, a couple of their riders, not necessarily riding in the front positions. They're all riding towards the back, with the team of Hugh Carthy. James Shaw is in there. Mazzolano then is the climb that we're on. 13% the gradient at the bottom and 11.6% at the top. The second climb is a little bit steeper than this. So we'll see how the race continues for these riders compared to how the women rode things yesterday. The women seem to take the first 3 laps or so relatively easy, and then things started to ignite, and then the race was over 40 kilometres from the finish.
Yeah, that was a special race, wasn't it? I think today, yeah, we expected a breakaway to go early, and it's gone very early in the first kilometres before the first climb that they're on now. So I would imagine it'll stay like this. They've already got 2 minutes 15 seconds already, and we're only just on the first climb. So yeah, this breakaway, the peloton will allow them to get a big advantage before they really decide to bring them back in. And I think the whole day is just going to be a slow burner. People just getting more and more tired, navigating over the climbs every lap. Also the breakaway will be getting more and more tired. It's just going to be a really brutally hard, long, wearing day.
Towards the front, Luke Rowe, riding in the colours of Great Britain.
So Luke Rowe just completed his 6th consecutive Tour de France, which is pretty impressive, and obviously he's been such an important rider in the Tour de France for Ineos, helped them to many victories, and now the captain he was. So great to see him here helping these younger riders, helping the likes of Pidcock in the GB team. He's so experienced, and he's still quite young. He's only I think he's 30 years old, so to have completed 6 Tour de France's and play such an important role, I think it's pretty impressive. Yeah,
and he looks after the team leader all the time. He makes the calls on the road as to who is going to be what's the plan going to be, how are we going to play this out, how things going to happen. So he's really the one who calls the shots all day. It's quite a stressful job to play in a team.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure the first time he was kind of put into that position, he was a bit nervous, and now year after year he's just so experienced, and I think everybody in the team trusts him. And I'm sure today in the Great Britain squad, most of the riders will be looking up to him because they know he's got that much experience. To do 6 consecutive Tour de France is at such a, I say young age, it's not young anymore, is it, compared to the people we've got winning races nowadays. But yeah, he's one of the oldest in the British squad that we've seen line up here. It's a really young team, for Great Britain. So he'll definitely be a crucial member of that team, be able to guide them and show everything that he knows. We've got Hugh Carthy, he's only 26. Knox, 24. We mentioned before, Pidcock, 21. So it's a young team for Great Britain. And of course, there's a few riders we would have liked to see lining up, but they're not here. Of course, the Yates brothers, Geraint Thomas. But it's an interesting World Championships when you've got the Giro coming up in, 6 days? It's not many days, is it?
Yeah, it's starting
5 days,
soon.
yeah. So, for that reason, we're seeing most of the hot contenders are here, the favourites, but there are a few names where we're not seeing lining up here simply because, how do you come here and line up? It's the World Championships, it's so important, but if you've got a big goal like the Giro, maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too much of an effort before, just 5 days before.
Yeah, you're more likely to see riders coming out of the Tour de France and then riding compared to riders coming out and riding the Giro this week. So you're seeing the likes of Simon Yates isn't here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a bit of a risk as well. If you've done all your training, all your whole season preparing for a goal like the Giro, and you want to win, you want to have a good performance there, do you come here? Do you risk it raining, there being a crash, something happening, or do you just stay focused on your main goal? But in saying that, the likes of the Yates brothers and Thomas, this is a course that would suit them. So it's a shame, but, that's cycling, and especially this season. We've never seen this before. This is the first time ever to have a World Championships 7 days after the Tour de France and 5 or 6 days until the Giro. It's just never happened before. People prepare differently.
Yeah, and in that scenario, you've got riders who can come out of the Tour de France with amazing form and riders who come out of the Tour de France totally wrecked. So you just really don't know how the body is going to perform during this particular race.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, a lot of riders themselves don't know. They'll have done training rides, they'll think they're recovered, and then actually they'll be feeling really good, but then when it really comes to crunch time, when they've got to make that final effort, maybe there's still that fatigue in the legs. They're just not quite as zippy as they were before, and they'll only know when it's 200 kilometres into the race and they're trying to make those efforts. Whereas, other people, maybe they think they've got top form, they were performing really well in the Tour de France, they feel good, and then actually they come here and it's just they've not been able to recover as quickly as they'd expected. And of course you can do efforts in training and you can recon the course, but it's different. It's different coming to a race, and actually the legs react differently. So people will have been obviously working with the coaches, they'll have all the statistics, the data, they'll know how the body is recovered, but finally it's about what happens at the end of the race. Can they really attack? Can they go for it? Can they make those moves that they want to? Or are they just too tired after such a hard Tour de France? And a Tour de France after no racing, of course. We had the lockdown. People have gone from nothing to a Tour de France and straight into the World Championships.
Yeah, so what have the riders done over the last week? How many riders have ridden this particular course in the last week? Do you think there's riders who've done loads of laps, riders who've done one lap, or how's their preparation been since they got here to Imola?
Yeah, I think it's been really, really varied. I think there's some riders that are probably nervous, they really aren't sure about these climbs and how hard they are, and therefore they'll have done most of the training on the course, checking out each climb, each corner, each lap. But I actually spoke to a few riders just to get an idea, and for example Lopez, I know that he's done quite a few laps just to make sure he knows the pinch points on the climbs, knows how it's going, whereas the likes of Valverde, Chavez, these riders are kind of, we've just come out the Tour de France as well, but we've got 9 laps to check out the course, we'll just do one, and I think they just did one lap. Road round, this climb's steep, this one's a bit steeper, corner here, that's enough. We've got 9 laps to really feel how the race is. So it just depends. It depends also, as we just mentioned, about fatigue. How tired are they? Do they really need to go on the course and do 5-6 laps and really mentally prepare, or is that actually worse? And they realise how hard the course is and they prefer not to know and just turn up and that's it. But I would be surprised if there was anybody who didn't see the course. We might have 9 laps to go, but it's important. You come to World Championships, you might go training on the flat, and then just finish your ride with 1 lap, and simply that's it.
Yeah, it's a situation that's interesting to work on as far as a rider's concerned. Do you look at the course and think, right, I've done enough, I've seen it once and that's enough? Because everyone I've spoken to who's ridden this course has gone round and just done a lap. Because they've gone, I've seen enough now. Like we were talking this morning, we were talking to Thor Hushoff. He did 1 lap. I rode 1 lap. Alejandro Valverde rode 1 lap. And I think everyone's kind of gone, yeah, I've seen enough now. This is really, really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think, in general, riders don't recon stages that much. Like, they might recon key mountain stages of a Tour de France, Giro d'Italia, before, when they've got time in training. But in general, you've got 21 stages in a Grand Tour. Riders don't know what's coming up. They can look at the profile, they can look at the maps, they can check everything, go on Google Maps and have a look at the road surface, all these things. The directors do a lot of research, but you just have to be adaptable. It's bike racing. That's one of the great things about cycling. You just go out, you go to all these different towns, countries, villages around the world, and you just get out on the road and you just adapt to what's coming up. So, of course, you need to be prepared. But how prepared do you need to be? How much do you need to know about a climb? If you've ridden it once, you know, you get a feel for it. It's also different to go around in a car. I don't know many people that would go in the car. For example, the directors, of course, most of them would drive round, so they get an idea, but it's not the same as a rider jumping on the bike and actually testing the legs, feeling the corners, feeling the climbs. Also, technical, difficult descents. It's important to know where's the really hard moments.
Getting towards the next point of challenge on this particular route, up onto the second climb of the day. And on the front group, we've got Jonas Koch of Germany, Torsten Train of Norway, Marco Friedrich of Austria, Daniel Fomenik of Kazakhstan, Yuki Arashiro of Japan, Edward Grossu sitting on the back there in the blue of Romania, and Ulysses Castillo Soto. They're the riders in the group. The German rider then is Jonas Koch, who's 27 years of age, 4th in the Tour of the Fjords. He also finished 8th in the Tour of Norway. He rides for CCC, has got a contract to the end of 2021 with that team, and he's just ridden the Tour de France. So he's come out of the Tour de France having finished 125th overall. He's a real worker for that team, and we saw him on the move in a few occasions in the Tour.